We got a countdown. Three, two, one. Um, we'll jump into recording because it should theoretically live stream to YouTube through my channel. So I'm curious if this will work. Uploading. Okay, that's uploaded. I wonder if I have to start like a new go live stream. Da, 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 da. Live stream, set it up that way. Yes. Start. Streaming software. Yes. Streaming software. So what is this? What is this saying? Okay, so if I go to settings and then live stream, how do I start the live stream? Default live stream. Let's do that. Let's copy this stream key and then stream URL. Settings are saved automatically. Great.
So does it stream both screens simultaneously, or is it one or the other depending on who's talking?
No, should stream both.
I
Should
see.
stream both. Okay, public, open, recording, good, high quality, advanced, yes, yes, yes. So how do we get to the live streaming portion? Unless I am live streaming and I just don't know it. All right, hold on. Let me open up another web browser real quick.
Yeah, can't you just check your own YouTube
Yeah,
channel?
that's what I was
Or
trying to do, and I don't see it.
I see.
So, oh, DreamApp live stream. Oh, I'm streaming to DreamApp? Oh, okay. It's streaming to DreamApp YouTube channel. Nice. Well, that's fine with me. Okay, sweet. Let's post the link here in the chat. Nice, nice. Yeah, I guess it's going to the DreamApp live stream, which is fine. Dream. Yeah, look at that. Okay, cool. I can see it. And it's both of us.
Okay.
Yeah, yeah. Your room is very red. All
Yeah,
right, well, let
sorry,
some
my
people
lighting isn't great, so
No, I kind of like it. I kind of it's very much the Corey vibe, you know?
yeah. Well, we have my roommate connects all the lights to the Amazon, but it's the internet, and now they don't change, so they're just stuck on red.
That's that's fantastic. And over me here, I've got the fucking disco party going on,
Yes, it's a
which
light
I
show,
kind of
hopefully.
like. I'm a fan of. It'd be great if I was like framed a little bit, right? So like the lion, just
Yeah.
saying. It'd be good. It'd be good. So you've got some stuff prepared for us, yes?
Somewhat. I wasn't sure exactly what we were doing, so I wouldn't say prepared so much as what I would normally talk about. But there are some things we could go back and forth. My teaching method is very much dialogical, so I rely a lot on questions people ask. But uh, I can try this and we can discuss. Or if you're live streaming too, I mean, maybe not today since there's no one watching probably, but we
No, no,
can
no.
get.
There's four people in the room right now.
Okay, well, if they want to ask questions, by all means, please do, because that's usually how I better respond.
I love it. I love it. Oh, let me refresh this so I can see. There's not a great chat moderation thing in here. I wish that the YouTube comments popped up in Riverside, but I guess they don't. But I can see the comments. Ashley says, "So excited for this conversation." Raylan says, "Wait, like what is your scope for questions?" I mean, I guess we'll keep it dream related or dream-esque. I don't listen. I don't know how Corey found me, but he's a very interesting gentleman. And so since there are some people here who are watching and who are viewing, Corey is one of these guys, and I don't know, maybe this makes Corey uncomfortable because I'm going to talk some nice things about him. But Corey is one of these guys who he's like a Renaissance man. He's like into gardening. He like knows about archetypes and culture. He knows about religion and comparative sociology. Like very interesting individual. And so when Corey found me, Corey found DreamApp and said, "Hey, like I'm interested in dreams. I do a lot of work in dreams." I instantly had to go and have an interview and be like, "Dude, what's this guy all about? I need to understand him more." And so when we did, I kind of grilled you with some questions, and I was like, "Well, if I had this dream, what would you think about it? If I had that dream, what would you think about it?" And Corey was just like, "Bam, bam, bam," and I'm like, "Oh, damn, this guy knows what he's talking about." And so I just got excited. And now Corey has been working with DreamApp for quite a bit. And he's been helping review the symbols and make sure that they sound right and that they're appropriate and that they're accurate to their actual, like, historical, archetypal, kind of like religious sociology meaning, which I'm really, really excited about. So I know sometimes for me, I can feel a little bit lonely in this space because there's not like a lot of other people doing it, and I really found kind of some companionship with Corey. So long-winded, but Corey's an amazing guy, and I'm really excited for you to be here, Corey. Did I leave
Thank
anything
you.
out?
No, I mean that's all people should need to know for this. I think. My
Yeah,
background
yeah.
is in
You don't need to know anything
psychoanalysis.
else.
Yeah.
Stop. No more. No,
I
no more
mean,
needs to be known.
I guess what's important here as far as DreamApp is that the method I use most of the time is Freudian, but Freudian dream analysis really only works if you know the person you're interpreting pretty well most of the time. So I with dream symbols just sort of given for training an AI or what have you. Usually, more Jungian symbolic approach is useful there. So
Yeah.
say this too, usually Jungians and Freudians don't get along, but I like to combine. So I'm very eclectic.
I feel like as kind of psychology and mental health and dream interpretation has gone on, I think some of the tension between Carl Jung and Sigmund Freud has kind of eased, and they can recognize the benefits and really the wisdom of both. But I'll definitely advocate for what Corey just said. Straight Freudian dream interpretation is wildly complex and requires just an insane level of depth into the individual person's psyche. So it makes it very difficult, very expensive, and very time consuming,
Mhm.
which when trying to formulate an app that's accessible to everyone and affordable to everyone is not really like a great model to use. There's definitely some things to learn, but it presents some challenges. Am I right?
Yeah, I imagine in the future, we can do some interesting stuff with AI, like word association with the person who's reporting the dream, and the AI could use some Freudian analysis from there, but we're not exactly there yet. So,
Yeah, 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 yeah. Not exactly there yet, but actually that may be closer than we think.
yes.
So I'm excited about it. I'm excited about it. Okay, all right, let me look at the chat here. Yes, we're talking about dreams tonight. Ashley says that you have a super cool background, by the way.
Thank you. Thank you,
She's loving
Ashley.
the red. I actually love the red too. It creates a nice shadow on your face too.
This is actually my analysis office. This is where I hold analysis. So,
Oh wow.
this is what
Wow.
my
I
patients see
do
with
you
more
do
sun.
most of your stuff virtually or do
No,
people come?
I've had inquiries in virtual, I guess virtually, but generally, if I will see a patient virtually, I want to meet them in person first a few times.
Wow, that's cool. That's cool. How do you see like a lot of patients throughout your week?
No, now it's weird. I started very early on, and when I was in New York City in training, and I had most of my patients
I
at the
thought you
time
were from New
there.
York. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Well,
Okay,
I'm from
cool.
I'm from Lexington, Kentucky. I just went to New York to study. You can't really study psychoanalysis in America many places, so I
No,
went
no.
there,
I'm
and
so
I
jealous of
also
Corey, by the way. I would love to go and study in New York for psychoanalysis. That's so cool.
I also intentionally chose like the most traditional Freudian analyst I could find, who was in New York City, and so I psychoanalyzed under him, and
That's sick.
I had most of my patients there at the time. Since coming back, I've done a myriad of things where my life has not been very stable in terms of location, so it's been difficult for me to continue to practice. It's only recently that I just started my practice up again. And so, no, at the moment I don't. But I'm trying to slowly get more as time goes on. I'm still very weird location wise. I live in a very, um, let me say, un- underdeveloped or ghetto. And so a lot of my
Sure.
patients will seem curious, but then they come and I think they get scared off. So it's almost like they have to go into the underworld to to come and
Oh, because when they come and see you, it's like
yes.
Is this guy analyzing me or selling me drugs? Like
Yes,
I don't know
yes,
what's gonna happen here.
exactly. So
That's great.
eventually I plan to move, but this is what I'm working with at the moment.
Okay. Yeah. Okay, sorry. Back to the chat here. Yeah, that's awesome. Welcome, Corey, says Julie, and then Raylan says this is not a dig on the app, but I noticed some of the things only have a shadow side written for interpretations. Are there really symbols that are either just light or shadow? That's a great question. What do you think about
Yeah,
that?
I'm not sure I understand the question, but maybe let me rephrase it to see if I do. Is that are they asking whether or not every symbol could potentially have a light and shadow, or are they saying are symbols only reducible to having lights and shadows?
Yeah, if I understand and chime in the comments here if I'm misinterpreting your question wrong. I'm understanding, is there a light side and shadow side, or are there light symbols and shadow symbols?
Okay. I mean,
Yeah.
I guess I'll just say that the light and shadow dichotomy is just a tool, and it has certain advantages, but it's not something universally applicable. And it's very important to understand that symbols are actually quite often ambiguous, and certain personalities can be attached specifically to the shadow or the light as a defense mechanism. So you have to be careful, depending on what you're doing or symbol or the person you're working with, over relying on that division. That being said, there's a wonderful poetic image that the more intense the sunlight grows, the more intense and the longer the shadow becomes. So you have to be very careful at over focusing one to the detriment of other.
Mm, I would agree. And I think to answer that question from my perspective, which I think is the same, right? I think best way to put it, I think, is to just use the imagery that's already there. So light and shadow, there is a ring light over here, right? And so it lights up this side of my face. And this side of my face is more in shadow. So we'll call this light and shadow, right? We'll use a very literal image here. This is still my face, but this side is light and this side is shadow. This side is no less my face than this side is my face. They are both my face. However, one is light and one is shadow. So if you're looking at a symbol like alligator, right? It's not that alligator is light or alligator is shadow, but every symbol, just like my face, has a side that is in the light and a side that is hidden. A side that is a little bit subverted into the unconscious and kind of hidden below the depths and maybe repressed or maybe embarrassed or maybe ashamed, right? So like with alligator, for instance, the shadow side of alligator is it's a monster that lies below the surface of the murky waters, waiting to pounce and waiting to attack its prey. That's kind of like this dark sort of manifesting part of that symbol. But the light side of it is an alligator can really symbolize strength and durability, right? They've got this very tough skin. They've got these sharp teeth. They're able to take a bite out of life's problems and really devour them and overcome some pretty insane obstacles. So it's not that an alligator is a good symbol or a bad symbol. It's just that you have to recognize that inside of every symbol, inside of every sort of psychic element, lies both these shadow aspects that may be sort of scary or maybe sort of unsettling, and parts that, if you really learn to embody that symbol, could really be beneficial to you. Now, I think most people think of alligator typically as just a negative symbol, but you could do this with like light symbols as well. Like, let's say light, I'm saying light, but typically interpreted as positive, right? Flower, maybe a really wonderful kind of light
That's
symbol,
crazy.
right?
That's the one I was thinking of.
No way.
Yeah.
Psychically connected, bruh. But like, we'll go for it. So like flower, right? Light and shadow of
Mhm.
flower. Yeah, we're on the same wavelength. How would
So
you
you,
define it?
the shadow for flower, I think, is that it's something that it's something I present. I think the philosopher Zizek talks about this. It's like something you present as a way to express love or romantic interest in someone. But if you think about
Mm.
it biologically, we're castrating the genitalia of this plant creature and giving it up to someone, which is a very dark imagery. But we sort of code over that with this idea of something that smells good, it looks pretty. So the dark side to me of that is that there are very dark aspects of what we try to do throughout our life to gain people's affection that we sort of
Ooh.
sprinkle over with perfume and things that look good or smell good. So flowers could have a dark symbolism in that respect as well. Or
Mm.
you could go Freudian and say it's a castration anxiety thing, but probably in most cases, unless the person's a botanist, I don't know. You know,
They might not be thinking that level of
right?
like anatomical literality, right? Uh, yeah, yeah. So same. I was gonna say flowers are a wonderful symbol of like life and fertility, right? It's the reproductive organ of a plant. A flower is, and so it's life, fertility. It smells nice, but the shadow side of a flower is it's fragile. It's not very strong. It's not very resilient. Flowers die very easy. You have to take a lot of care of flowers in order to see them really blossom into the fruit that they want to be and that they were supposed to be. And so there's a positive and negative to that. And you have to be aware of that. I think a lot of people try and be flowers in their life, where they try and be very pleasant and very appealing to other people. But if you're going to try and be this level of flower appealing to others, you of necessity sacrifice the resiliency and the strength that you may have had otherwise if you were just a little bit less appealing. And so you
Hmm.
see that people who try and be people pleasers, they're very pleasant, but they really don't stand for much. They don't weather the storms of our life. And so there's the positive and negative, light and shadow of a flower symbol. And just the same way, I didn't even think about it's kind of fucked up that we like chop flowers. Let me chop your reproductive organs off and
Yeah.
then offer them to my lover. Like that's kind of I mean, if you think about it, it's kind of messed up.
Going off what you're saying too, the idea that with the most pretty flowers, the ones that smell the most intensely are the ones that attract the most bees, which from a purely
Mm.
biological point of view is good, but you also, psychologically speaking, you attract so many people, they steal all your pollen. You run out of energy because you
Ooh.
become so extroverted that you take a bunch of people in, but they're not actually interested in you. It's sort of like a narcissistic, non-symbiotic, sort of poisonous potentially relationships that you start to develop.
Yeah, yeah. There are a lot of people with flower tattoos on their body right now, really reconsidering their life choices. No. Like, damn, I didn't know flower was so deep. I just got it from my grandma. Oh man. Someone says off topic. I know. Sorry, Jesse. Corey, dude, you gotta let me know if you have a psychoanalyst therapist video on BPD. Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. You've been this one of these users who follows me a lot. Her name's Raylan. She's been talking about BPD quite a lot lately. Just as a thought, do you get into like BPD? Well, you mean bipolar disorder or borderline personality disorder when you say BPD, Raylan? But while she answers that, do you get into that stuff?
Little patients who were diagnosed with it, but it's not something I generally focus too much on. Personally, I don't. I don't. Are they asking if I know of a video somewhere that talks about it?
Yeah, if you no 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 not like if you know of a video, I mean that would be helpful too, but like if you have ever spoken or presented or made a YouTube video on that topic and she
No,
clarifies to
not
say borderline.
not. I'm generally not a very DSM oriented therapist, so it's not some. These sorts of things generally aren't really something I concern myself with specifically. So I can't. If I don't know if there's any if it means anything to you, but I'm more in the school of someone like R.D. Laing, who sort of tries to
Oh
deconstruct or
man, yeah,
go
yeah, yeah.
pass
R.D.
beyond
Lang.
diagnosis. I'll have patients come in and they tell me all these things they're already diagnosed with, and I'll make notes of it, but I don't. I try to let a patient or individual be themselves, and just I don't try to put too much emphasis on the definition of the diagnosis.
Man, I love that. I love that so much. And I think that's what, my Discord server has been talking about quite a lot right now is there's such a haste to diagnosis that then pigeonholes a person and eliminates kind of the nuance of their lived and personal
Hmm.
experience with their psyche and their mental health. And so, Raylan, I don't know if that's like what you were kind of referencing with that. But I know that's something that we've been talking about a lot in our group. And I do know Corey. Corey is not the kind of guy to be confined by the constraints of the DSM. He
Yeah,
wants
no,
to
I
get to the
don't.
root of it.
Yes, it's a shortcut. It's encouraged by insurance company stuff, and I
Yeah.
don't do insurance, so I don't have to worry about that thing. But I find also that from the point of view of mental health, it's not always something beneficial for the patient because they can get very attached to that and their locus of control can be affected in a negative way by attaching their identity to that diagnosis. So
Yeah,
it's
I've
something
seen that a lot.
you have to be very careful with it.
100%. 100%. Yeah. There's another good question here by When the Sun Goes Down. When the Sun Goes Down says, is feeling and experiencing things in dreams like lucid dreaming? You got any thoughts on that?
Um, I'm sorry, I'm having difficulty understanding the questions.
That's
They're
okay. I'll
saying
repeat it.
yes.
Is feeling and experiencing things in dreams like lucid dreaming? So like if you're feeling something and you're experiencing something in a dream, is that like lucid dreaming?
Not necessarily. Lucid dreaming would more specifically refer to you being self aware and having a significant level of potency and control over the dream and having
Yeah.
actual agency in the dream. You can have dreams that are totally not lucid and yet you're feeling very intense emotion. So I wouldn't conflate them.
Yeah, yeah. The latest research that I kind of know about, kind of the foremost researcher into the lucid dream space is a guy. Oh, I'm gonna brain fart on his name now. Stephen LaBerge. Stephen LaBerge is kind of like the foremost researcher into lucid dreams, and the way that he defines it for his research purposes is any time that a participant in his research, anytime a participant is aware that they are dreaming, that counts as a lucid dream. Now, they actually have been talking about kind of creating a spectrum for lucid dreaming, right? So a spectrum of lucidity. Some people can totally control their dreams when they're lucid, and they can kind of really manipulate the nuances of their experience. Other people, they can't control anything. They're just, I know this is a dream, but I can't do shit about it.
Mhm.
And so it's kind of like this spectrum of control in a dream, that though they may be related, doesn't have anything to do with the intensity of the dream. Right.
Mhm.
Those are two separate kind of topics. Now you can have a lucid dream that you don't feel is very vivid. You could also have a lucid dream that you do feel is very vivid. They're two separate topics. So it's a great question, but that's kind of how I would kind of define that. Yeah, I would agree with you then, Corey.
So just I noticed the title on this is History of Dreams. Are we going to do like a quick crash course on this?
If you've, I did not prepare a crash course on it. I know that's what we talked about in Slack. So if you have a
Yeah,
history of dreams that you want to kind of go
I could just
into,
say some very brief
super
things, and if
down.
people have questions, I can expand from there.
I
So
I love that. Yeah.
I'll just say so quickly the big difference is you can basically divide the history dream interpretation between modernity and basically everything before modernity. And the big difference, and you
Where do you
can't
kind of put
reduce it
that
to
line?
this,
Just
probably
curious.
18th, 19th
Modernity.
century, which is around the
18.
invention of.
Got
Um,
it. Got it.
and so before this, although it even starts to peter out towards the 16th century specifically, and again, I don't want to reduce things. For instance, you have, so let me say the essential difference, and then I'll
Okay.
get into the
Okay.
nuance. The main thing is that before modernity, you have people understanding dreams in a very religious, spiritual, potentially in a bad way, but good way, as well, like say an angel or a god coming to give you a certain message or foretell the future, prophecies. Most cultures had some form of divination based on dreams. And
Yeah.
then
Very spiritual.
in modernity, you shift to a very rationalist, usually materialist approach. Now, that divides further into camps where dreams mean nothing. That was pretty much the dominant theory and still remains in some schools of psychology.
Mm.
And then people like Freud or Jung, where they're, Freud especially, still much a materialist atheist, but he says no, dreams are actually not only significant, but one of the most significant tools we have to understanding the human conscious. So
Right.
within this regard, right now, there's nuance. You have very early what are called in the Greek oneiromancer, or people who divine or scientists of dreams.
Yeah.
You
That's where we get the term like onerism, right?
yes, yes,
That's
exactly,
the study of dreams. That's like the Latin
yes.
word for the study of dreams.
Uh, Latin or Greek, I'm actually not sure, but it's one
True.
of
True.
those.
True.
And
Oh,
it sounds Greek to me, but
cool.
I could be totally wrong. But
I don't.
uh, trying to think. She's the Greek god of the moon, Artemis. So there's this guy, Art, Art. It means love of Artemis. This is how his name's translated, Moros or something like this. and he was a very early dream scientist, if you want. But he wrote this huge thing on divinancy of dreams. So it's like you plug in this symbol, you get this meaning. But he has a lot of nuance. For example, he talks about which will interest Freud, and Freud actually gives credit to him for talking about this very early on. Ancient Greek culture. He's saying he has a lot of people coming to him who have sex dreams with their mother, and he's saying like, but the very classical, reductive divination approach to this is like, this will always mean more or less this situation, usually regarding some sin or something to do with the God's will. And he's saying it can mean this, but it also depends on the position of sex you're in with your mother and all this other stuff he's going. So that he starts to detail it a lot out. So he's kind of the first one saying like, there is divination stuff going on here, but there's also a certain scientific approach about how we can interpret the symbols specifically. And he even says, which Freud also credits him, is that dreams can also arise from very physical causes, such as eating a very late meal or certain things happening throughout the day. He also says that there is a way to understand a dream in the form of a rebus, which is like those picture games where it's like it's like you'll see a wheel. It's a pictorial game, like a logic puzzle. It's like you'll see a picture of something. Rebus. So it's like you see a picture of a kid walking, and then you'll see the letters ER next to it, and you're supposed to figure out what word is actually meant by this. It's a common game you'll see in like kids' books and stuff, or like the things they hand out to kids at like Olive Garden or something. But he's basically saying like there's a sense in which, very advanced for his time. He's saying like there's a sense in which language itself actually relates to the symbol in the dream, so that the dream is coding something in language. Freud will take on this big time, but you're already seeing this in ancient Greece, and the Muslim scholars.
So it's way back then.
Yes, and the Muslim scholars take this up, and they have a lot of similar theories in the early Christian monastics, because they do a lot of stuff with dreams, because they take dreams very seriously, not exactly the way the pagans are looking at it, but they see dreams as potentially coming from God, but most of the time it's like a demonic trick, or you've ate too much, or you've had lustful thoughts throughout the day. So again, already in some way prefiguring Freud, he will take a lot of this, but they're coming at it from a religious point of view, even though they're arriving at similar conclusions to Freud.
Wow, that's wild.
Yes, so you'll look also. By the way, if you really,
I'm learning something today, man. Damn. Okay.
The very first chapter in Freud's interpretation of dreams, which he's naming after that initial neuromancer, whose name I couldn't really get at, the Artemis lover. He dedicates that whole book to looking at all the previous literature on dream interpretation. It's a very even if you don't read the rest of the book, that's a very interesting chapter.
It is, which I've read that book. But I'm not familiar with all this stuff. Stuff pre-Freud, I have to admit, I'm a little bit ignorant of. So this is great.
It's fascinating. So the other two big things I'll mention is what's called incubation, which is a big religious practice, pretty much universal. And that's where you go to a specific temple or shrine, you fall asleep, and you're supposed to receive a dream from the god associated with that shrine. It's often understood in a prognosis-like way. Like, you have a problem in this dream, you will be given the answer to how to solve that problem. Now, often this requires a divinator that you go to, like a priest or someone who interprets the dream. It's like, oh, God X wants you to do Y in order to be healed. This was very big in the Greek Clyspiats, which was a cult of Asclepius, who was the Greek god of healing and medicine. And he had these temples. I always say he's the first psychoanalyst, really, because they have a portico, a porch, and you go there with your problem. And they're like, you tell the priest, like, okay, well, I need you to fall asleep at this time of day, depending on the stars, whatever. And so you lie down on this couch, and you have a dream.
I can get behind this therapy.
And the priest comes to you, and he listens to your dream, and then he tells you what it means, and you're supposed to be cured. And you have to make some sort of idol after this. You carve an idol. Very interesting to this day.
I like the totem part, the idol part.
Yes. It has to deal with what's being healed too. So if you have a heart problem, you carve a heart thing. And we still have some of this archaeologically. We have some of these idols that were carved. But so these were the Asclepiads. They were like the healers. Hippocrates and all these famous doctors from classical antiquity come out of this.
I'm changing my Discord name. I'm going to be Asclepiad. That's going to be
Actually, the symbol you'll see sometimes it's the Mercury symbol with two snakes, but the one where it's a rod with one snake, you also see this in the Old Testament, where Moses holds it up to have all the Jews pray on. That is the Asclepiad symbol. It's a rod with a snake, and it basically means healing, or healing by the poison of. very famous
Yeah.
Hermetic tradition, which is the idea
Right.
that alchemy is all around this. You take in a poison and you turn it into gold. You turn it into something beneficial. So this goes into Plato with Phaedrus and the Pharmacon. It's like the things that hurt us are often which can help us heal. And you have this
Hmm.
archetype with Jung called the wounded healer, which is that the best doctors are the ones who've had the most suffering.
Right. Which is always why, like, when people just ask for a simple interpretation of a snake in a dream, I have such a difficult time giving them a simple
Yes, it's a
interpretation
very
because it's,
versatile.
I mean, snake to me. I mean, I don't know if you feel there's a different symbol that's more complex, but for me, snake is the most complex.
It's definitely,
I
yes,
even
one of
feel
them.
like
Yes.
dragon is easier to interpret than
Hmm.
snake is because it's so multifaceted and it's such a part of just anthropology and sociology and religion. Like the snake is just this insane symbol. I'm enamored by it.
Yes.
Yeah.
So also, even to this day, the Greek monks, the Christian monks in Greece, they actually still do incubation, where you go to a specific monastery for a specific saint or so on, and you have
Oh,
a dream
true.
that's
Yeah,
supposed
yeah.
to be from that. Obviously they have different ways of interpreting this, and the pagans do, but
Hmm.
this is a tradition that is still practiced today, even in Christians, which to Americans sounds weird because we're not used to that form of Christianity, but
No, we don't do that. But I did take
um,
a trip to Greece and to the
uh-huh.
mountains in Meteora, and they
Oh
have
yes, that's a
each
great
saint.
monastery there. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm gonna grab something here. This is I have something from Meteora. This is one of the carved icons. This
Oh
is
yeah.
do you
Which
know who
saint
that
is
is? You
that?
probably do.
I can't
This
read it. Is
is
it Saint Nina?
Barbara.
Oh, Barbara. Okay.
So this is the Monastery of the Rose, and so I got this one because my grandmother's name is Barbara, and
Oh,
so I got this one, and so each saint is almost like its own like their own deity, right? They
yes,
have their
yes,
own like a saint of something. Like there's
yeah,
there's the saint of the coal miners and the saint of the ship traders, right, and the sailors, right? So it's
yes,
almost like each one has a different deity, and based on what problem you're facing, you'll go to that monastery and
yes.
you'll light a candle and you go through the contemplative process, which
Hmm.
is cool. So I have that. Reminds me of my grandma above my computer here.
The other tradition I wanted to mention in brief with traditional understanding of dreams is that there was this idea in modern New Age stuff. They'll call this astral projection, but that's a recent term for it. But it was this
That is a very
understanding.
new recent term, like astral
Yes,
projection. Yeah.
it develops in Theosophy from Madame Blavatsky. But so in the ancient traditions, it was understood that dreaming, not necessarily in every case, but potentially, especially with lucid dreaming, you could actually take a part of your soul and go out into the world or a certain aspect of the world, like maybe another, layer of the world, a spiritual layer or whatever, and you could actually accomplish certain things this way. And apparently, I haven't read too much into this, so this I don't say this as like true history, but apparently it was known that some Chinese generals intentionally mastered this art in order to spy on enemy camps. Um, so I don't know if that's true, but this is
Is that
something
where
I've
that
come
came from?
across. Where
Like
what
kind
came
of
from?
this thought of astral projection is like
Yeah, well, yes. So
Chinese generals.
not per se, but definitely inclusive. Because Blavatsky
Whoa.
was someone who was just very well read, kind of like Crowley as well. These people got into this. They were just very well read. She grew up in this rich Russian family and just had her whole her whole family's library. But they read a bunch of these ancient religious books and traditional religious books, and they realized there was a certain pattern. And Blavatsky science of religion. And so she just kind of took what was common and perennial in all of this and developed these terms. I don't think the term astral projection is necessarily original to her. I don't think she coins it. But these things get a lot of their coinage from those traditions, which sort of exploded in the 40s, 50s, and 60s. I mean, they were huge in Nazi Germany, and the Nazi Party itself had a lot of respect for Blavatsky. So it just kind of explodes after World War II. A lot of these things thought goes into Britain, goes into America, and you get this explosion of the New Age culture and New Age religions that were coming out of this. And you can trace all this back to France. And there's a lot of theories why in the 16th century France just
Okay.
explodes with occultism. Um,
Whoa. Someone
I
asked
won't
an
go too.
interesting question
Yes,
in the
sorry. Go
chat
ahead.
to just to interrupt a little bit. Someone asked when the sun goes down asked is astral projecting and shifting the same thing? And I asked like what do you mean by shifting like shape
I'm not
shifting? And they
familiar.
said
Yeah.
like dream shifting. people have been doing. So
I'm
I'm
not
waiting for a
familiar with
response
dream
to see.
shifting. Yeah.
Okay, okay. So when the sun goes down, if you could give us a little bit more what you mean by dream shifting, I'm super curious. I wonder if they're the same. You know,
Yeah,
I guess
I had no idea.
astral projection to me is like, you kind of rise above into that ethereal plane.
Hmm.
Shifting, I think, is like almost embodying something else. That's the way that I think about it, and I don't know if
Okay.
that's what you mean. But to me, that would be all kind of part of the same kind of occultism sort of stuff. Oh, here you go. Like it was a trend on TikTok. People were shifting to different universes. Oh, okay, like shifting to a totally alternate reality and doing it when they went to sleep, is what they said.
Okay.
Is that more new age? Like
That's
shifting
I've
into
never
different
heard of it. I mean,
universes,
it
realities?
it sounds like it's a very recent idea with the whole multiverse thing going around, but
It sounds very multiverse, yeah.
so it has this tinge
Someone
of
says, yeah, like
something.
Doctor Strange.
Yeah, it has this tinge of something that's uniquely very modern and recent about it, with quantum mechanics and all this other stuff. But looking at it archetypically, it's quite similar. I mean, the idea with astral projection doesn't have this idea of multiverses. It's all one cosmos. But what you are doing is that within one cosmos, you have different layers of reality, usually hierarchical. And you'll see the early Greek philosophers explore this a lot, like Plato. But
It's like
basically, when
Dante's
you're
Inferno, right? Different
yes,
strata.
different plane, and all that is on. This is pre-Copernicus. All that's like basically on Earth. When you're in Paradiso, you're just like right above the clouds, basically,
Uh,
going into the planets, which in Dante's world are way closer to the Earth than we think of them now after Copernicus. But
true, true.
it's much more local in this world, you know. But the and purgatory is literally like a mountain that would, by modern standards, be like on the southwest side of South America. So
Oh shit, that's crazy.
Odysseus sails to it, and God strikes him down. You know, this is places you could actually visit in Dante's mind. You know, if God lets you.
Whoa.
Actually, a very interesting tidbit. Galileo, when his first public speech, was actually trying to prove why Dante's Inferno was scientifically true and also theologically true. That it was an actual spot in the earth that you went down to, and he was trying to show how it was plausible given all the architecture that Dante goes into detail. I think Galileo eventually rejects this, but it's interesting that this is kind of what made him famous.
That's
This
crazy
lecture,
cool. What?
yes.
Someone
So
says, how freaking cool would that be, though? Also, I thought Freddy Krueger instead of Doctor Strange at first. Oh, yeah, like, what's that horror movie where, like, he comes through the dream to, like,
oh
attack
yeah,
you while
yeah,
you sleep?
Nightmare on Elm Street. So
There you go.
more similar. Yeah, I guess I had a different idea of shifting, but this would be potential, and this was even its own form of divination, was going into other people's dreams for various reasons.
Yes,
But
that's
that would
been really
definitely,
popular on
yeah.
TikTok.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, yeah, like
I
this
don't
this
keep up with
idea of
TikTok very
divination.
well.
Well, there's this also big thing on TikTok, the O method, which was like in order to manifest things, you think about them very intensely while you orgasm, and that helps
Okay.
them manifest. So there's different manifestation techniques, and this is kind of the new age sort of spiritual side of TikTok, maybe even the witchy side of TikTok, where you would use different techniques to manifest. One being dreams, another one being orgasm, to manifest things into your life and make them come into fruition or reality. So yeah, that there was. I mean, it's still a popular niche on TikTok, but there was a moment where it
Uh-huh.
was very popular. Those videos were very much circulating.
That reminds me a bit of tantric sex and metaphysics, Hinduism with sexuality, but also kind of reminds me of Wilhelm Reich, who was the psychoanalyst who immigrated to America from Austria after he was kicked out of
Bill
Freud's inner circle. Like,
Wilhelm
uh,
Reich. How
Wilhelm
could you
Reich.
be? Was he so sexual that Freud kicked him out? Is that
His
possible?
theories, I think Freud liked him, but he was so weird and radical that it didn't bode well for
You
Freud's
remind me of
social
my mother.
circle.
Oh.
Yeah. Well, funny you should say that. For Reich, the reason he went to Freud was because he read Freud and he's like, this is true. Like he was reading the Oedipal complex. He's like, consciously, this is what he was self-aware about in his own psychology. And
Wow.
that is what attracted. Anyway, he's a very crazy guy. He's a very fascinating guy. There's a lot of, but the facts, the Wikipedia facts, if you will. He comes to America.
Sure.
He ostensibly builds this machine that harnesses orgasms to control the weather, and he helps all these
He builds a
farmers in
machine?
Kansas. Yes, the orgone accumulator. It looks like a
How
giant
do you
organ.
wait.
It gets
What?
crazy. It gets crazy. And
He
his
builds an
documents,
orgasm
his
collecting machine.
his documents are collected by the FBI. They're destroyed. They take all his prototypes. Nowadays, there's very few therapists, psychoanalysts who practice Reichian psychoanalysis, but so he takes this passage in Freud, where Freud
Right.
says that repressed emotions are stored not only in the mind, the neurons, but also in the muscle. And he says the essential emotional trauma is actually in the muscle. This is why some people, if they go to massage therapy a lot, they'll suddenly start crying, remember intense memories they've forgotten about.
Yeah. Well, it
So
reminds
he's,
me of Alice Miller. Alice Miller has the great book, The Body Keeps the Score, which is
oh,
huge
okay.
in modern, CBT circles.
Okay, I'm not familiar with it, but it sounds
Yeah,
similar,
yeah, yeah.
yeah. But Reichian psychoanalysis is basically psychoanalysis with massaging. So there's actual massaging involved in it.
Ooh, it reminds me. There's a very, very popular trend right now of trauma-informed yoga. So they'll
Yeah,
do
okay,
they'll do
that
certain
sounds similar, yeah.
very similar. Yeah. So there's certain yoga poses because I don't know. I guess they've found that trauma is very much stored in the hips. So different sort of stretching and hip flexion movements will kind of help release trauma that may be stored inside the body, and so that thought is still very much alive.
Yeah. Well, I think there's definitely truth to it. It's
Yeah.
actually Reich's way of sort of giving a less Darwinian as well. He says that repressed emotions are actually stored in the face, and that people's facial structure will mirror, in a similar way, the sort of emotions that are repressed, and therefore the sort of personality or character mechanism that they have. He calls it character
Yeah.
armor. But yeah, the
And you
whole
see that in the
diagnosis.
face.
Yes. He had a whole
Ooh.
diagnosis of fascism based off. He was very anti-fascist, and he had a whole diagnosis of how
Okay.
fascism functions and comes into power based on this sort of emotions that are repressed on a cultural level.
Wow. I don't think I would disagree with that. I think there's a
Yeah.
huge cultural component. Raylan asks another question in the comments. She says, um, "That's why that's why that top-down processing don't work on trauma." I guess kind of like, the very intellectual part, analytical. Would you call
Yes.
dream interpretation a top-down analysis? And I asked for a little clarification on that. She says, "You're the therapist." LOL, JK. I'm not using that right. Hold on. But I think if I'm understanding what she says, and correct me if I'm wrong, Raylan, but top-down method meaning kind of like very much analytical. So would you
Hmm.
consider dream interpretation an analytical? Like you start with the thoughts and you
Hmm.
move into the emotions, versus a more bottom-up method where you start with the feelings and the emotions, maybe in the body, and you work up to the analysis, the thoughts.
It can be anything in between those. I mean, obviously, some level analysis will be involved because you're using language to talk about these emotions, but it needn't be
Right.
top down. It could be middle, up, and down simultaneously. And I think often that's how dream interpretation works in the therapeutic context. But any therapy that's not looking at the emotions in the dream or paying attention to the lack thereof, I don't think is going to make much progress in a deep way.
No, no, it's really not. It's really not. I think a lot of it boils down to the flavor or the personality of the therapist themselves. I
Hmm.
mean, they have to be pretty true to themselves, and it's hard to really hide your true disposition when you're working with someone in their dreams or just in counseling psychotherapy altogether. So like for me, I can tend to be pretty analytical. I'm pretty analytical in the way that I think about things. Like I have to understand the goal and the meaning, and then I'll flow into kind of the emotions. And so I think, especially for me, I find in my practice, I'm often counterbalancing people's very emotional and very vivid and experiential dreams with an analysis of it. So I find that
Hmm.
people come in with these very vivid emotions, and I analyze them, which releases some of that psychic tension.
Hmm.
So now, if someone came to me who was very much up in their thoughts about it, and I notice an imbalance by them being overly analytical, I would go very much almost like Gestalt, have them
Hmm.
do some very physical kind of interactions to and probably be intentionally confusing and intentionally antagonistic to their very analytical mind. So that way I kind of break up that defense mechanism because I see it very much as a defense. They're being
Hmm.
overly analytical so that way they can hide from the real insight that their dream is trying to tell them.
Hmm.
So to me, it's a counterbalance and an authenticity to who my personality is.
Yeah.
I don't know. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, in psychoanalysis, it's very long term, so you kind of take very stoic disposition. and you kind of let the patient reveal over time their emotions. So when you help them interpret their dreams, but you don't really do too much analysis on it with them. You kind of let them unfold those emotions, and you point things out that they might not be aware of on the emotional level. But the focus of that form of therapy is more on how the patient starts to have all these ideas or feelings towards the analyst, and that's really the meat of it in that form of therapy.
Yeah, yeah. Wow, I forget that too. Like psychoanalysis, like Freudian psychoanalysis, is painstakingly slow compared
Hmm.
to modern American psychology. Like,
Yes.
like I think how long would a normal therapy session last? Like, is it an hour or would it be
For
more than an hour?
It's 50 minutes. We call it the 50-minute hour. Yeah.
Okay, okay. So it would be the 50-minute hour, but when you're saying, long-term therapy, I mean, Freud would see somebody for how long? Like how many sessions?
Well, usually 4 to 5 times a week, ideally, and that can go on. For Freud, it's you want to repeat the Oedipal phase. So basically, 3 to 5 years is when that starts to happen in child development. Likewise,
Wow, four to
anything
five
going,
times a week, three to
yeah,
four times a week for 3 to 5 years.
yes, yeah,
Yeah, yeah. Insurance companies don't like that so much.
no, and that's why a lot of psychoanalysts don't do insurance, at least, especially not in America. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Someone asks, "Are you going to upload this in the podcast?" Right? Yeah, I think the new direction that I would like to go is I would like to start doing these on a much more frequent basis and make these a very consistent part of the podcast schedule. Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. Because it's fascinating stuff, and I mean, oh my gosh, we've scratched the surface of like 100 different topics and gone into none of them really yet.
Yeah,
We're just having
we're just
some fun,
gliding.
kind of having an ADHD bounce around all
Yes.
these topics, which has been really fun. But yeah, yeah, good questions, good questions. Let me scroll back up to the top, unless there was something else you wanted to cover that I
No,
interrupted
no,
you
go
with.
ahead. No, I never really got to modernity, but we'll have plenty of time for that. So.
Oh, true, true, true. I wanted to see if I missed anything here. Astral projection stuff. I've had dreams where I felt aware that it was a dream, but couldn't do anything, and felt
Mhm.
everything so intensely, water on my skin, being dizzy in the dream. I'm very stuck on the dream I had recently. I put in the Discord, I just totally trips me out. Okay, that's a great question. So, like, comments or thoughts about dreams that are particularly intense, perhaps ones where they feel almost real. Like, especially, I know people talk to me about pain in a dream. I'll be stabbed in a dream and I'll
Mhm.
I'll feel that pain viscerally. Is there any insight that you have in that, like why some are so intense and why some just don't feel as intense as others?
Yeah, I also want to draw attention to the fact that they're saying they're conscious, like they're aware they're dreaming,
True.
which I
Yes.
think is
Yes.
so they're aware they're dreaming, but they aren't able to control it. I think you can explain this in many ways with just neuroscience, but I think on a deeper level, which is manifesting neuroscientifically, is that there's actually a defense mechanism going on where they're trying to prevent themselves from being in control of the dream for fear of what might happen.
Mm-hmm.
Or so it in classical Freudian terminology, we say it's sort of the super ego trying to fight against the coming to power and
Mm-hmm.
trying to gain control of the dream, which would mean that this person probably feels that they're also going out of control in their everyday waking life. Not necessarily, but in a deeper way, and
But it's a
that
good thought.
the dream is trying to help that person. Like there's a good part of the dream trying to help the person come into power over that, but there's another part of the dream that's saying no, you aren't ready for the power, you can't handle it. So I guess
Mm.
now going more generally to this idea where some dreams are very intense emotionally, other dreams again I read it as a repression thing or a defense, because it's something that the dream is either trying to help you come into to contact with emotions you have very deeply but you aren't able to really connect with in your everyday waking life, or
Mm-hmm.
it's trying to prevent you in its sort of short-term sight from getting contact with those emotions. So it's sort of letting you have your cake and eat it too. You have the content that would normally evoke the dramatic response of those
Mm-hmm.
emotions without being allowed to experiencing them. So both ways are sort of therapeutic ways of the dream trying to help you, but they're not always the best possible ways to do it.
Yeah. So they're kind of trying to give you a benefit of experiencing them so strong or not experiencing them at all, right?
Right.
So
Both
almost as a
both are
counterbalance.
reparative in theory, but they're not necessarily the best possible ways. And usually more
Right.
healthy psyches will have more healthy defense mechanisms.
Hmm.
And more troubled, anxious ridden psyches will have less healthy defense mechanisms, and those manifest in the dream work as well.
Whoa. So then, if you were going to see someone, well, if you had someone who had a very anxious or stressed type of psyche, like the one that you're talking about, what sort of characteristic markers would you expect to see in their dreams that would indicate that to you? Like, okay, this is a very anxious type of person.
Um, Dreams. So even very healthy people can have very terrifying, problematic, disturbing dreams from now to then.
Well, that's a relief in some
Yeah.
ways.
So,
You know, it's like, okay, I'm not. If I have bad dreams, it doesn't mean I'm crazy.
and I'm
Uh,
also just of the persuasion that, especially nowadays, for a variety of reasons, you have very, 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 very few people who are actually healthy psychologically. I think, perhaps more than any point in human history, live in a crisis of mental health. We do not produce mentally healthy people as a
not gonna
culture.
argue with that. Not gonna argue with
So
that.
I think off the bat, it's not an expectancy. But also, I'll say that if they have either they're not having any dreams at all. Now that could just be for other almost purely biophysical reasons. But in a lot of cases, it's that a person actually isn't letting the part of the brain that is conscious of the dreams is doing a lot of work to repress them because they're
Mm.
very powerful. Or you have a person who has very disturbing and very paranoid. You're being persecuted by everything, or that could be a manifestation of narcissism or paranoia, which in some ways are similar psychologically. But usually
Ooh,
these dreams that are very
narcissism and
recurring,
paranoia. Interesting.
yeah, usually these dreams that are very, they have a pattern. These dreams that are very disturbing. That's when you need to take your time and look at them. And usually, if a dream is successfully interpreted and acted out emotionally, those dreams will stop, and you'll see that a lot in therapy. But it's hard to say things so generally on this topic. But I guess that's what I would go with.
True, true. Yeah, being general is difficult for sure. Because it is such a nuanced topic. And I mean, human beings are so nuanced, you know? Let's see. Let me read this comment. I haven't had time to read it here. As an add on, if you want to talk about my support beam question, you don't have to, but I had just seriously don't understand the basis of the idea of thoughts and dreams and daydreams being completely random. Oh, true. Yeah, she brought this up earlier. But not literal, yes. I understand that, but meaningless, I don't get it. So the question that Raylan kind of asked in the beginning of this chat was what sort of psychological basis or research basis or science basis, whatever, what grounding does the idea that dreams are meaningless have? Like, where did that come from? Why did we come up with this idea that they're
Th-
pointless, they're meaningless, they're garbage of the brain?
yeah, this gets into, I think, where science is often philosophy pretending to be science. It's kind of something that is
Ah,
just for one, dreams are very difficult to study in a strict scientific way. I mean, now
yeah.
more so in the past 20, 30 years than ever before because we can do a lot more neuroimaging.
We've
But
gotten better, yeah.
for most of history, you have to understand the context in which the science of dreams in a modern sense came into being was during the Enlightenment, the late part of the Enlightenment, going into modernism. And people were desperate to get away and detach themselves from all this religious new age, their version of new age, woo woo. And people were just pressing scientific theories that might have truth in them. Like Darwinism is a great example. They were pressing them in every possible direction and overextending these things in an almost religiously fanatic way. And that often led to scientists sort of just taking for granted whatever they're told by their professors without really serious investigation.
Mm,
Especially in psychology, which is a bit more of a soft science, you often have, if you will, memes that are spread by professors or people in authority, and people don't really question them and
memes.
they just kind of assume it's true. And
Yeah.
these sort of become a underlying philosophy that is pervaded as science, but is really just philosophy undergirding a scientific approach. And this is inevitable, and I think this is why the best scientists were often also very interesting philosophers like Newton or Tesla, who were very self-aware, at least
Yes.
to some degree, of their biases and preconceptions. There is no naked science. Nietzsche is a great philosopher to read about this. Every science is acting on an act of faith. But a
Mm-hmm.
lot of times, the less philosophical awareness scientists have, the less they're able to counter their own philosophical presuppositions. And these things start
Ooh.
to run out of control on a cultural level. And I think the approach in the early 18th to late 20th century about dreams is basically coming out of this.
I love the way that you put that. I love the way that you put that. I have I have a very soft spot in my heart. I feel like a college freshman when I say that I have a very high affinity for Nietzsche and I just love his
Yeah,
stuff because it's like that's what every college freshman in intro to psych says or intro to philosophy says. But I do. I really like Nietzsche.
yeah, he's
Um,
great.
he really is
He's
great.
great
You
for a
know,
reason. Yeah.
he's fun. But what you said is, those soft scientists and those in the soft science fields who claim to be totally devoid of philosophical bias are usually the ones who are the most predisposed to injecting that philosophical bias into their work. Those who
Yeah.
say, I recognize and I understand I have this bias are the ones who are able to counterbalance it. I mean, it's kind of the classic Freudian principle of like projection and
Hmm.
transference, countertransference. We see in others what we're not able to see in ourselves, and we
And
see
if
that
you
stuff projected.
if you have that presupposition as a psychologist, it's very easy to point to a very flimsy sort of passive evidence that like we can't find anything in dreams that are pointing to anything in real to do if you don't have an interpretation of dreams. If you're just looking at a dream and it's like, oh, my dog comes back and it has the head of my grandma. This is, and you're like, oh, this is obviously nonsense. Well, there's actually a very rich literary, uh, linguistic thing that could be going on there, but you're not tuned into that. So you just kind of see past it. You have blinders on. Where you're looking
Yes.
at someone like Freud or Jung, and they have a whole rich idea and system of looking at the meaning of these dreams. So it's like you can pass off a lot of things as if they're evidence or lack thereof if you have the right or therefore wrong, really, philosophical way of understanding and interpreting those evidences.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. Okay, I got two questions before we wrap up for the evening, because this has been just wonderful time. When the sun goes down asks, "Is Corey a hypnotherapist too? I missed some of his info earlier. Do you do any hypnosis?"
No, I was never trained in hypnosis.
Which is very
uh,
psychoanalytic. I mean,
it is,
classic
yeah.
Freudian, Jungian
Freud
hypnosis.
originally, I mean, Freud's idea with the couch in part was that it puts people in a semi-hypnotic state.
Correct?
Works on certain
Yeah,
people better than others, but
true.
he wasn't good at hypnosis, and I don't know how much this is true, but it seems a lot of hypnosis is animal magnetism, which is something you either have or you don't. Now you're a hypnotist, so I could be totally wrong about this, but it seems like a gift certain people. I don't know if I have it or not. It's not something I've really ever tried, but so I'm not trained in hypnosis though.
Sure, sure. We've developed a lot since the kind of beginning of hypnosis, right? So yes, there was animal magnetism, which was super, super funny because there was like Joseph Mesmer, and he
Hmm.
believed a lot in animal magnetism, and he actually had this huge confrontation with Benjamin Franklin, and Benjamin Franklin totally made a laughing stock of him in front of everybody and disproved that he's like, "There's no fucking magnetism. You're full of shit." So we've developed since then, but it was
uh,
a great confrontation between the two of them, these great scientific minds. But hypnosis is just yeah, we can go into hypnosis. We could have a whole kind of conversation about hypnosis. But no, there are some techniques that are very similar to poetry and very similar to good speakers, right? There's some ways to really engage someone's attention. And through engaging their attention, you start to engage their unconscious mind in the more symbolic and literary parts of that person. And so
mhm,
a hypnotist, which is what I do, I'm a hypnotherapist, right? We will use our language and structure it intentionally to elicit more projective type of emotions from the client, which helps kind of bypass some of the more conscious defenses. So
mhm.
yeah, like especially even the question we had before, which is, is dream interpretation a top-down model? No, not necessarily. In fact, I'll use hypnotherapy as part of my dream interpretation to bypass some of those top level defense
Hmm.
mechanisms that people will engage in. So that's a whole separate conversation. But I think there's a couple more that are popping in because people know we're going to end soon. But the one that everyone's been interested to ask you is they would love to know what your thoughts are on dreams where your teeth fall out.
It
What's that
depends.
all about?
The most easy general answer is that the teeth are something, especially in American culture, is like you're very much what you present people as a sign of like you're well put together, you have a good smile, or you
True.
have the money and background that can afford keeping up a good smile.
Mm-hmm.
So it's this idea of like how you look to others and your shame and your social status. So people might have a thought in the day that comes up about something that happened to them that was really embarrassing or shameful, but they sort of
Ooh.
suppress it and they don't really think about it. I wouldn't be surprised if that night they have a dream about their teeth falling out or something happening with their teeth. In many cases, it's about the face, and it's about what going into you, coming out of you. It's kind of like, what Jesus says, it's not what goes in, it what comes out. So it's like all these
Yeah.
ideas that's specifically, so first off the face, but then also this idea of the persona in Jungian terms, but also this idea of what is coming out of you. So
Hmm.
again, social situations and your sort of social face that you have in a crowd, dealing with
I
that in
love that.
general.
I love
Yeah.
that. Yeah, yeah. I've always taken it the very similar but different direction slightly. But I actually like yours a lot. Shame and guilt have a very strong place in our dreams and in our emotions. But I've always kind of said dreams about your teeth falling out. Teeth are what break down food into bite-sized
Hmm.
pieces. So if your teeth are falling out, you don't feel, or you've had anxiety or you're having stress
Hmm.
about breaking down life's problems into manageable bite sizes. So it's like,
Definitely. Yeah.
I can't take a
It,
bite out of that problem.
yes.
It's kind of
It's
the
it's very versatile.
right. It's a very
Yeah.
versatile one, but it's some kind of stress, is
Yeah.
what I think. Yeah. Okay, let's see. Jesse teaches hypnotherapy. This is true. Yeah. Yeah, I know Jesse is. This convo just reminds me of Jesse saying your mind isn't against you. It's just misunderstood so much. That's true. When the sun goes down says, I'm a somnambulist. I drop very easily into hypnosis. True, true. Yeah, yeah. We could talk about what makes a person a somnambulist too, which is fun. But yeah, yeah. Any closing thoughts? I gotta give a huge shout out to Corey. If you don't follow him on social media, he doesn't have a huge social media footprint, but he does have a wonderful podcast on his YouTube channel. Can you plug the name so I don't miss?
Oh,
It's
yeah.
the 50-minute hour
The
is what it's
50-minute
called,
hour
but
is the
make sure
name,
they get
and
to it right.
it's 50 as in the number 50, and then minute hour. Really, the best place is Spotify. It's not all
Yeah,
uploaded on YouTube. So
he has the
Spotify or
wildest
iTunes.
guests, just the
Yeah.
craziest guests. Crazy in the nice sense. Not I'm not
Yeah.
making a psychological
Yeah.
diagnosis, but it's a wonderful podcast. You really should check it out. Corey's a wonderful guy, and he's in. If you're a part of the Discord server, he is also part of the Discord server for
Not
Lion
very
Mental Health, and
active.
he has his own. He has his own Discord server too,
Yeah.
so you can find him there. You go under the
Jung
name
Freud.
Jung Freud,
Young Freud.
JungFreud. So
Yes.
if you want to find him on Discord, send him a message or follow his podcast over on Spotify. That'd be really cool. He's got some cool
That
stuff to
was
share.
my street name when I lived in New York City. There was kind of like a forum at a Washington Square Park, and I would go there, and in Union Square especially, and I would
Yeah.
find all these people with very weird worldviews, and we would all talk, and they all gave each other's nicknames, and the nickname they gave me was Young Freud because it kind of sounds like a gangster name or something
It's like a
like.
rapper name,
Yeah,
Yeah, like Young
but
Money, whatever. Young
but
Freud.
it's playing on Jung and Freud, so it
Jung and
stuck.
Freud. I love that so much. I love that so much. Well, listen, I am. Well, we're definitely going to do more of these. I'm about to have a baby within the next week. The doctor says we won't make it till next week before this baby's delivered. So there will be a slight hiccup in the regularly scheduled programming. But we're definitely going to have much more of these, and they'll be uploaded as podcasts. I'm very excited. Corey, thanks so much for your time. I really appreciate you, man.
Yeah.
Anything else to plug before we wrap up?
No, that's all from me.
Nice. I love it. Well, subscribe to the channel, follow here on DreamApp, download the free DreamApp. I mean, it's the best place to get information about your dreams and everything that's going on inside your mind. And we're always making updates. I'm hoping you'll see some more of these like coaching things and little lectures from Corey inside the app itself. So we got some wonderful things to kind of do. So thank you everyone for joining, and I'll see you next time.
Okay.
Bye.
Next time, everyone.